Ms. Huerta, thank you for taking the time to visit us on today. Here we're in Mount Washington, here in Los Angeles. Why did you agree to do this documentary called Outlawing Shakespeare?
I believe this documentary is extremely important because, number one, it talks to truth, and people in Arizona especially need to know the truth about what is going on in that state, about all of the racist damage and harm that is being done, especially to our children, our Latino children in the state. So this documentary is very important, and I'm very proud to be part of it.
Were you surprised that Shakespeare was banned in Mexican American Studies classes in the Tucson Unified School District?
I was very surprised to learn that Shakespeare was banned in the schools as part of Mexican American Studies, because I know that that theme of Shakespeare as it relates to Mexican American Studies has also been taught here in California, and I think people here would think it was just absolutely hilarious that they would want to ban it in Arizona. But again, it goes along with all of the extreme positions that they've taken in Arizona that make no sense at all.
What is your understanding of what is occurring in Arizona with regard to HB 2281, the ethnic studies ban?
Well, my understanding is that they are banning the teaching of any type of history that has to do particularly with Mexico, with Mexican Americans, and I imagine other ethnic groups also with the contributions, but their contributions have been to our history of the United States of America and Arizona specifically.
Republicans hate Latinos, okay? Republicans hate Latinos. Now, we know that first of all...
So the famous words, Republicans hate Latinos. Tell me about those words. What happened?
Well, I've been invited to speak at the high school. This is after the walkouts that had happened there, you know, the big immigrant rights walkouts that happened everywhere. And so they actually wanted me to talk to the students about not walking out again. I believe it was on Cinco de Mayo. And so my message to the students that I was speaking to was that you don't have to walk out. It's great that what you did, it showed courage and valor to do that, but there's other ways that we can also make our voices heard. And one of the ways would be to send a telegram, send a postcard, do a postcard campaign, and get everybody to send postcards to the Republican National Committee saying, why do Republicans hate Latinos? Because we know that the whole anti-immigrant campaign has been mostly against people from Mexico, people from Latin America. Mm-hmm. And it hasn't been against people from Canada, it's been mostly against Latinos.
So the words Republicans hate Latinos was to go on the postcard?
Yeah, it was actually to send up to the Republicans saying, why do Republicans hate Latinos? And you are engaged in this attack on our Latino family. And when I say that, while the attack has been on immigrants, my great-grandfather was in the Civil War as part of the Union Army, but my grandchildren get discriminated against because they're Latinos. One of my great-grandchildren has been harassed because he happens to be dark of skin. So the attack has been supposedly against the undocumented, but it isn't. It's against all of us who happen to be Latinos. And then I found out, because they did have a hearing in the state legislature about my comment, and I found out that the senator that had the hearing had actually been campaigning on those same campuses there when he was running for the Senate and asking people to vote for him. And he was running as a Republican, running for the state Senate, campaigning at this different school campuses when he was running, and yet he was trying to make an issue about what I had said.
So the issue, when even at the point that you were saying it, did you even think it was that big of a deal?
No, I didn't. And the other thing is that after I made that comment, they tried to fire the principal of the school, they tried to fire the teacher, and then they even ended up passing a law in the Arizona legislature that before speakers can go to a school that they have to be cleared. So, they went that far. Not only having the hearing in the state legislature, and then at the school where I spoke, they invited a Republican to come and speak, to kind of counter anything that I had said. And it was interesting because when I speak, I always say, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to challenge what I say, please speak up. I'll be glad to answer any questions. I know not everybody's going to agree with my comments. Well, when they had this Republican person go speak, they said to the students, you can't ask any questions. So what the students did, a lot of them, is actually they put duct tape on their mouth, and then when she spoke, they all turned their backs on her. And of course, that created more problems, I guess.
Do you think they should have done that?
The students?
Yes.
Absolutely. I think that the students are free to demonstrate and to, make their feelings, this is First Amendment, right? This is what First Amendment's all about.
So, Attorney General Tom Horne said, the fight over ethnic studies started when Dolores Huerta gave a speech at Tucson High School.
Mm-hmm.
Why would he say that? I mean, because you didn't think that comment was such a big deal. Why would he say, again, he said, the fight over ethnic studies started when Dolores Huerta gave a speech at Tucson High School. And that's the Attorney General Tom Horne. Why do you think he said that?
I think that whatever reasoning he had, it was just an excuse. Because basically, and the Republican Party is really trying to, all of this attack is really political. They know that when Latinos become citizens, when they vote, that the majority of them vote for the Democratic Party. And I spoke to Tom DeLay when he was, well, not to him specifically, but as chief of staff, and we're talking about immigration reform, about getting another legalization bill at that time. And he said, well, we don't want these people to be legalized. And I said, why not? He said, because once they become citizens, they're going to vote for the Democratic Party. And my response to him is, well, the Republicans should do more for the Latino community, and I'm sure that they will also vote for the Republicans.
Do you know of any Republicans bothered by some of the legislation in Arizona, that some of the anti-immigrant, the anti-ethnic studies legislation? Do you know of some of some Republicans who you would say don't hate Latinos?
Oh, I'm sure there are. I mean, I know some Republicans. In California, we had a lot of moderate Republicans, people like Bob McCloskey, who is still a very strong advocate for civil rights even to this day. And in California we had a lot of moderate Republicans. I think Earl Warren was a moderate Republican. But what's happened with the Republican Party, there's actually been a purge within the party itself to get rid of any of the moderates, and so that they have now, unfortunately, a lot of extremists in the Republican Party right now, with a really xenophobic. You might say, they're very xenophobic because, and they're attacking. And we know that this whole issue of immigrants coming to the United States, that everybody is profiting by the immigrants. I mean, so you have all of your businesses because of the contributions of immigrants. That the consumption is in, of course, multi-billions of dollars. The Social Security system, what immigrants contribute to Social Security, that they'll never be able to get that money back. Some estimates are as much as $35 billion that has gone into the Social Security system. So the immigrants, continue to contribute to the economy with their consumption and also with their work that they do. So there's no really valid reason for them to do this, horrendous attack on immigrants the way that they have been doing starting in Arizona. And in fact, when they were trying to pass the Setzenbrenner bill, which was very much like 1070, of course this is the bill that they passed in Arizona, and when they tried to pass the Setzenbrenner bill, which would have been at the national level, we met with Setzenbrenner's assistants, and he was in Illinois, I believe, and we said to him, why are you trying to pass this bill? This is not a border state, This is not a border state. Everybody's against this bill. The unions are, the religions are, community organizations. Why do you want to pass a bill that's this onerous? Well, guess what? It's not a border state, but it is. They do have a lot of federal prisons, and we do know that since they started the attack on immigrants, that the private prison corporations actually they prophesized that their profits were going to go up 21% by putting the immigrants in prisons. So if you want to say what was this all about, it's about politics and it's about jails and it's about making profits off of people's bodies. Because these corporations, these prison corporations are private prisons that they have built specifically for the incarceration of immigrants.
Is there any particular corporation or politician who has been egregious that you would that needs to be named?
Well, I guess we can name we can actually name a lot of them. Setzenbrenner to begin with, who initially supported that bill. Which, by the way, the Setzenbrenner bill passed the House in 10 days from the time that it was introduced. It just kind of whipped through the House of Representatives when it was first introduced. I mean, there was very little hearings about it. It was kind of railroaded right through. And I think if you look at the leadership of the Republican Party, they haven't done anything to mitigate this, and in fact, they've gone along. And even John McCain, who was a person that we thought would be on our side. When I made that speech, I remember saying specifically, except John McCain, because right after the Setzenbrenner bill, right after all of the marches in 2006, then there was an effort then to pass an immigration bill, and they actually had 7 Republicans, or maybe 11 Republicans that were in support of passing immigration reform at that time. And of course, all of them, all of them then left afterwards, after that time, and then refused to support any kind of immigration reform, including John McCain.
Imagine I was Tom Horne, just for a few seconds. I'm Mr. Horne, and you heard him say the fight over ethnic studies started when Dolores Huerta gave a speech at Tucson High School. What would you say to him directly that would speak to him and his heart? As someone who immigrated here from Canada, what would you say to him? Imagine I am Tom Horne.
I would ask him why he made that statement in the first place. And I would also ask him, don't you agree that a large number of Republicans, including people in the leadership of the Republican Party, have been involved in this attack on innocent people, on innocent immigrants that are just here trying to make a better life. And then reminding them that every single person that's come to the United States, unless you're Native American, their family came from somewhere. This is a nation of immigrants. Every single immigrant group that's come to the United States has been legalized at some point or the other. This has always been the policy of the United States. When we're asking for legalization as part of immigration reform, it's not anything different than anything that we've ever done. This has always been the policy of the United States of America.
Let's go back to that day that you were at Tucson High School. And I know that we're, a speech that was 6 years ago, and, that here you are in LA talking about, a detail. But explain to us again what your intent was.
Well, my intent was to, number one, so the students wouldn't walk out again. This is the reason I went there. They had walked out once and got on their march, and basically we were saying, you don't have to walk out. There's other ways that you can show your feelings. And one of these is by writing to your congressperson, writing to your senators, writing to the Republican National Committee. Be engaged civically. Sometimes the pen is mightier than the sword, as they say.
Mr. Horne says that the whole point of Mexican American studies, and you as one of the individuals, is promoting the notion of Aztlán, a separate, to separate from the United States and to combine to Mexico. And that Mexican American studies, to a certain extent, you are part of that effort. What's your reaction?
Well, I think that's ridiculous. I mean, my father was a state assemblyman in the state of New Mexico. I have been a voter since I was old enough to vote. I have cousins of my mother's that were judges in Texas. We've always been part of the American dream, so to speak. For him to say something like that is like it shows like his ignorance, frankly. It shows how ignorant he is. The reason that Mexican American studies or ethnic studies are important, be it for Mexican Americans or for Asians or for African Americans, because people, especially young students, need to know what their people contributed to this society. You know, Mexican American kids need to know that the Mexicans that they brought from Mexico are the ones that developed the land so that it could be farmable. That they were brought in to work the mines because people here didn't know how to work the mines. So they brought in miners from Zacatecas and Durango and other places to teach people here how to do the mines. That there were Mexicans that came here and helped build the railroads along with the Chinese. How many people know that the Chinese were very instrumental in building the railroads? And how many of the Chinese died because they took them to places like Northern California, like Lake Tahoe and Reno and places like that where they didn't have the proper clothes and many of them froze to death. You know, the Filipinos that were brought here that did so much, again, to make the state of California a rich agricultural producer. And African Americans who built the White House and the Congress. It was African slaves that built the White House and the Congress. How many people know that? And African American kids need to know this. Mexican American kids need to know this. Filipino kids need to know. They need to know what their contributions of their people did to build this country. This country was built by immigrants, and kids of color need to know because they need that for their own self-esteem, for their own self-image. Because unfortunately, we still have a lot of racial discrimination in our United States of America, and you know, kids are made to feel like they're less valuable, like they don't have any worth. It's very important for them to know this.
So you believe that ethnicity, that freedom to express your ethnicity, is important?
Well, it's more. It's even more than the freedom to express your ethnicity. It's important to have the freedom to know your ethnicity, what your background was. I don't think that it doesn't hurt the United States anymore, or in any way. It doesn't hurt the United States in any way for someone in Arizona to know that this was part of Mexico, or that California and Nevada and New Mexico and parts of Oregon and Utah were part of Mexico. That doesn't hurt anything, but it's important for Mexican American kids to know that. I mean, when you have streets like, when you have California and Arizona and Nevada and Nuevo Mexico, these are all Spanish names, right? And it's important for kids to know how that happened and why that is. It doesn't hurt the United States for any of us to know our history any more than it is for people to know that Germans are the ones that settled Philadelphia, or that the U.S. Constitution was first printed in German before it was printed in English.
I did not know that.
I mean, it's important for people to know their history, and it does. I think for people to have ethnic pride, it doesn't take away from anything from our United States, because our United States was composed of immigrants, and no one, whether you're from Mexico or the Philippines or China, Japan, or if you're from Denmark or Ireland or whatever, nobody should ever be put into a space where you have to deny who you are, your authenticity. I mean, we celebrate, you know, St. Patrick's Day, and everybody thinks it's fabulous. Italians celebrate Columbus Day, you know. There's nothing wrong with that. This adds to the fabric and the color of our society. It makes it richer. It doesn't take anything away from any of us.
So when Mr. Horne says, okay, but what you're doing by promoting ethnic studies, you're actually dividing us because you're teaching us what's different instead of what's bringing us together. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I totally disagree with him. I mean, I learned to eat with chopsticks when I was 7 years old. I went with my Chinese girlfriend to do her Buddhist prayers, and she came with me to my Catholic Mass. That didn't take anything away from her. For me, it didn't divide the country in any way, shape, or form. I mean, trying to homogenize everyone, I think, is really bad. I think we add something to our society when we can bring in our ethnicity and we can be proud of it. It doesn't take anything away. And I feel sorry. I understand Mr. Horne is Jewish, right? And I mean, you know, I have been to Seder's, which is of course a celebration of the Passover, which really, that's where our Catholic Mass came from. It came from the Seder. And I think it's good to know these things, because a lot of Catholics, they don't know that this was the origin of the Catholic Mass, was a Seder, you know?
I did not know.
Yeah, but I mean, it enriches one when we know about other people's cultures and their background. And it also helps you understand people.
you'll talk to some people in Tucson that greatly admire you. And there's some people that say, Dolores Huerta came to Tucson, she said all this, and she left. And she hasn't been back to help us fight this battle. What's your response to them?
Well, I've actually been to Tucson many times. In fact, it's my annual pilgrimage, you might say, that I go to Tucson quite often, and as often as I'm invited. And actually, after all of this happened, when 1070 passed, I actually had planned to go to Arizona and just to start organizing there, because I do believe that the way that we can fix Arizona is by organizing the people in Arizona to fight all of these inequities and all of this discrimination that is taking place there. And the reason I didn't go back is because we had a lot of organizations that went into Arizona. We had several of the labor unions, and everybody and their brother was going to go in there and organize. And so I felt, well, there's so many people going in there, it'd be superfluous if I went in there. But I do want to go back to Arizona. I want to go back and I want to raise some money and I want to hire some organizers and go out there and do some grassroots organizing, the way that Cesar and I organized the Farm Workers Union, and before that the Community Service Organization, and the way that I'm organizing now with my foundation. But we can, because it's just a matter of educating people and showing them that they have power, that they can change things. And I know, with all of my 50-some years of experience in organizing, that people in our country have really good hearts. People in our United States will always want to do the right thing. And sometimes they don't, because they don't know. They don't know. They don't understand. But once that they understand the way things happen, I mean, like a lot of people, when I speak to, I did a big tour in Iowa, for instance. And I went to maybe 15 or 20 different communities in Iowa, meeting with small groups of people and large groups of people, and talking to them about immigration reform. And when you explain to people, why do people leave their beautiful places that they have in Guatemala or Chiapas or Oaxaca, these places where we go to as tourists? Because they're pushed out by laws like NAFTA, like the free trade agreements. We export more corn to Mexico than the people there can't even compete with United States corn, because our corn is subsidized. So you've got millions of corn farmers that have to come to the United States because they cannot sell their corn anymore. Because American corn is so cheap, it puts them out of business. And people don't know that, but explain that to them. People don't come because they want to come; they're forced to come because they have no jobs, they have no opportunities. And then people understand just the way that their grandparents or great-grandparents came from Europe or other places, because they had no opportunities. Well, I would say to them that I didn't think I left them. I have been back to Arizona many times during all of this stuff that's been going on. I've been back to Tucson specifically, and I was there most recently with the DREAM Act students, fasting with them in front of John McCain's office when they were trying to vote the bill in the Senate. I was there again. I spoke at the University of Arizona there in Tucson not too long ago. And I think some of the criticisms that I got from some, not the students themselves, but some of the other kind of what I call more militant types, is that they felt that I was saying to people that they need to register to vote, and they need to vote, and they need to vote for the Democratic Party. And so I got some criticism. And I think the criticism that I got on email or YouTube or whatever, they were saying, well, Dolores thinks that we should vote for the Democratic Party. And my answer, well, it's a first step. It's a first step anyway. Not that all the Democrats are going to be with us, because we know that they're not. We know that there's some that are going to vote against us. But this has been my message continuously in Arizona. 30% of the population are Latino. How can we let them get away with doing this to our population? Because people aren't voting. And some of the students I spoke to when we were doing the fast in front of McCain's office, they actually told me that their leaders told them not to vote, because if they did, they would be supporting the establishment. So, I would love, but if I go back to Arizona, I'm not going to go there as a tourist. I want to go there and I want to, help organize that state and help educate the people of Arizona so that they can then, really confront these politicians and the governor about some of these laws. By the way, some of the laws, anti-immigrant or anti-Latino laws that have been passed, were actually passed in the legislature when Napolitano was governor, but she vetoed them. She didn't sign them.
Do you think that some of the Latino elected officials need to do some additional work?
Absolutely. I think once you're in an elected position, then your job is to go out there and to educate your constituents. And we have a lot of the Latino politicians that have been there for a long time, and they really don't do very much. You know, they just get themselves reelected, but they've got to go out there and do the work. They've got to do like Congressman Grijalva does, who's out there working very hard, to educate not only the people in Arizona, but the people throughout the United States.
That Mexican American studies is being taken away, and that a more multicultural approach should be taken that may include the Mexican American, but it's really just a overall multicultural approach.
Well, I know that in politics, sometimes you have to make compromises, and I know that happened here in California also, where they had, some colleges that had like Raza studies or Mexican American studies, and then they turned it into ethnic studies. But actually what's happened is that, that was happening, I guess, back in the 80s, but then you go on into the 90s, and then all of a sudden you have Chicano studies. And not only do you have Chicano studies in California, but now you can get a doctorate at Chicano studies. And of course the first place was Santa Barbara. And when we think of Santa Barbara, this is a place where Rudy Acuna was denied a professorship there because they felt he was not quote unquote qualified. But again, the students organized, and not only did they get Chicano studies, but they got a doctorate in Chicano studies. And that was the first college, and now we have other colleges that are now offering doctorates in Chicano studies. So we know that, the path to justice is kind of a long path, but I would prophesize here that in Arizona, the day will come, and not too far away, where we will actually have Chicano studies in the colleges, and you'll have doctorate degrees of Chicano studies. It's going to happen. It's going to happen. All of these efforts that these folks are making are really, it's like a pushback. We have 52 million Latinos now in the United States. Okay, this is not a population that can be ignored. And they're, as they say in Spanish, están dando patadas de ahogados, right? It's like when somebody is drowning and they're giving this kicks, and that's basically what they're doing. They're trying to push back. It's too late. I'm sorry. And it's actually not even, the population growth is not just from immigration. The population growth is actually from people that are here that continue to have children. Okay, so I'm sorry, no matter what Tom Horne does, or what Jan Brewer does, or what Setzenbrenner, or these guys that wrote the law, from the 1070 law, Kobach, I think is the guy's name, from Kansas or wherever he's from, nothing that they can do can stop this. I mean, I'm sorry.
What is this?
This means suppressing the Latino population to keep them from getting an education, to keep them from telling their stories, to keep ethnic studies, or even, and we can go further than that. I mean, it's not just the idea of getting rid of ethnic studies. How do we keep these people from even going to college? How can we raise the tuition fee so high that they can't afford to go to college? This is what's happening in our country, and it's against Latinos, it's against African Americans. Basically, how do we keep these people of color down? They're losing the war, and they know it.
Mexican American Studies in the Tucson Unified School District was specifically made because of anti-desegregation law. Tucson Unified was doing that bad. Mexican American Studies showed that students going through the program were actually improving. So what you're saying is that by cutting Mexican American Studies, those who are doing this are doing it specifically to hurt future generations of Latinos.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because, I mean, number one, all that a student has is their self. That student, his or herself. Their story is authentic, who they are, what they've gone through, what their families have gone through. This is their story. And when you're trying to deny them their story, you're taking away their power. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to take away the power of the individual whose family probably are immigrants, who knows what they've gone through. They're taking away their story, they're taking away their authenticity, they're taking away their power.
One elected official told us was that Mexican American studies improves outcomes for Latinos, and that most Latino leaders will come out of organizations like Mecha, organizations that nurture them when they're young. One elected official said that by removing these programs, they're attempting to kill future Latino leaders. What's your thought on that?
Well, again, I think that when somebody has a good sense of their self-image and of who they are, it makes it easier for them to step into that realm of not outside of your comfort zone. You have that self-confidence. So I think it does help people to become leaders. Not that it's a requirement, but I think it's no accident that we have so many, in California, for instance, so many of our leaders that are in our legislature, in government, our Mayor Antonio Viragosa, Secretary of Labor Solis, I could go on and on, that have been mechistas that were involved in the college Mexican-American organizations on their campuses. And all over the country, you have MAS in Colorado, UMass, on and on and on. It does give people self-confidence, especially when a Latino goes to college, you're going to be in the minority. And, when you have an organization that supports you, then it makes it easier for you to be able to, gives you the confidence to be able to out there and take some leadership. So I think it does maybe inhibits leadership when you remove some of these organizations and some of these programs. Because, I can say that myself, even though my family, was born in New Mexico, my father was an assemblyman, we were on this side of the border when they crossed that line, so we didn't have to immigrate here, we were here in the United States when they crossed that line between us and Mexico. But even I, as a youngster going to school as a Mexican-American, especially in high school, we were so discriminated against, and it was terrible. My self-confidence was pretty much crushed, even though I had been a Girl Scout. For 10 years, I had been involved in my church and the organizations, and I was part of a folklorico dance group and performed in public. I still, when I was in school, was very, very inhibited, and I hated my high school. I hated it. So badly that I cannot, this is the truth, I cannot remember my high school graduation. That's how bad it was. And it wasn't until I went to Mexico with my mother for the first time. She had never been to Mexico. She was born here also, as her parents were born here, that I saw a whole nation of Mexicans that were proud to be Mexicans. And that really was, it gave me so much in terms of my own image. It made me so strong just to be able to go to Mexico and see doctors and lawyers and the guys that were the plane pilots, that were all Mexican. It made a big difference in my life. And I think that's what Chicano studies, that's what Mecha does, and these organizations. It gives children and students a sense of their image, of their self-image. And now with all of the attacks that have been, that have been lambasting the immigrants, you see kids, and I've seen this, I've gone to homes where the kids don't want to speak Spanish. I know my own sister, one of her grandchildren, because her daughter married a Mexican-American kid. He's Mexican-American, but she went home and she asked her mother, are they going to deport my daddy? And he's a citizen, he was born here, but he happens to be Mexican. Are they going to deport my daddy? But all of this, what's the damage that has been done to our children by all of this anti-immigrant rhetoric and hate that has been, rained on them, it's been very, very hard.
I read there was a book written about you by Mario Garcia. And in the book, it talks about how you, Cesar, and you were a balancing act. That he would say that he was a shyer one and you were more outspoken. What would he say about how you've dealt with the whole Arizona issue?
Well, I'll tell you how Cesar dealt with it. In 1972, when they passed a law in Arizona that if a farm worker went on strike, they could go to prison. If you said boycott grapes or boycott lettuce or anything, you could go to prison. Okay? So what Cesar did is he did a 25-day fast in Arizona, in El Campito, right there in Guadalupe, which is a suburb, a Native American reservation outside of Phoenix. And he went without food for 25 days. And only Holy Communion and water. And then when he finished that fast, he didn't come back to California. He stayed in Arizona. And he, starting from Yuma at the Mexican border, he went and he did a caravan and a march, all the way up to Flagstaff. And as he went through the state, they registered people to vote, registered people to vote, registered people to vote. As a result of that voter registration drive that happened in 1972, we got the first Latino elected to Arizona, Governor Castro. And then we got the first Native American elected to the legislature, the first African American, and the first Latino in the state Senate, Manuel Peña. And a lot of the leaders in Arizona today, Pastor, Jory Lopez, I can name them all, what's his name, Alfredo Gutierrez, they all came out, Mary Rose, they all came out of that campaign that we did, and that Cesar did back in Arizona in 1972. And by the way, that's where Si Se Puede started.
Oh, tell us how it started.
Well, Cesar was fasting. Every night we would have a mass and we would have a rally right there in El Campito where he was fasting. And so we would, as organizers, we would go out and try to bring people to come in and to join us. And I went to a group of the Latino leaders there in Phoenix, and I was asking them to come and join us to support Cesar, what he was doing. And they told me, no, Dolores, aquí en Arizona no se puede. In Arizona, we can't do that. In California, you guys can do all of that, but in Arizona, we can't. Aquí no se puede. No, we can't. And my answer to them was, sí se puede in Arizona. Sí se puede. And that night when I went back and I reported this to the rally that we had, and I said, gave the story to them, and when I told them, sí se puede, and everybody yelled up, and they started shouting, and they started clapping, sí se puede, sí se puede. So that was the initial lema, slogan of sí se puede.
Let's move on to Mr. Montenegro. We met with Mr. Montenegro, three of us, and he said that we would allow him to, that he would allow us to film him. And he said that he would be a coward if he did not stop ethnic studies because ethnic studies was destroying our. It was destroying the fabric of America. The fabric of America. Mr. Montenegro came here as a little boy, immigrated from El Salvador. This is kind of the question that what I was asking you in terms of you've seen the progression in your life. You remember when you were a little girl to an adult to, and here you have someone who is 28, 29 years old who made a decision that is going to affect the rest of his life. And I think you now kind of get to where I'm going. What would you say to Mr. Montenegro, who is the person who wrote HB 2281, the anti-ethnic studies legislation? As a human being, as a...
I believe that Mr. Montenegro is a really good example of why we need ethnic studies, so that people don't have to deny who they are. It's obvious that Mr. Montenegro is thinking more of his political career than he's thinking about the effect of his decisions or the misuse of his power as a state legislator. And you know, the fact that he would even do this, and it's not uncommon, I think, because people do deny their heritage and then they want to be part of the mainstream, or they're afraid of being discriminated against, they deny who they are. When I was going to college, we had some of our, there were just a few of us, a handful of us in school, but they changed their names, you know. They changed it from Martinez to Martin, you know, from Star from Estrella to Star, and people would stop speaking Spanish. And I remember one fellow who was a good friend, and he was a football star, and he couldn't deny who he was, porque era prieto, he was very dark skinned, but then he couldn't speak Spanish anymore. he forgot, that he could speak Spanish. They wanted so much to fit in with the majority crowd. And it's obviously that's where Mr. Montenegro is. He wants to fit in with those that he feels are the majority that are oppressing. And that's not new in our community. We've always had the middleman, the labor contractors, or the, you might say I guess there's a name for them. In Spanish, they have names for them also. The people that are in the middle, they're helping to oppress the rest. And that's where Mr. Montenegro is. And I feel sorry for him. And we know that there are people like him in our community.
If he were right here in front of you, as a grandmother, you said you're a great grandmother, and I can't believe that. But what would you say to him if he were your grandchild?
If he were my grandchild, first of all, I would like to know what part of El Salvador he came from, what his family went through. I would have him watch the movie Voces Inocentes about the wars in El Salvador and how so many poor people were killed during those wars, and see what part of that society that he related to. And I don't know, sometimes you do see people that change. For instance, the person I was speaking about that refused to speak Spanish, later on he became the chairman of the Mexican American Hall of Fame. and so I've known a lot of those people that do change eventually, and he might even change, I think, later on. But sometimes they're political opportunists, right? They're going to go the way that the wind blows because they don't have very much strength of character. So I would say to Mr. Montenegro, look at your own country, El Salvador. Look what they went through, the kind of oppression and the people that were killed because of an unjust war that we in the United States were assisting in El Salvador, and how many people suffered, and kind of try to bring him to his own political sense. It may not happen because, sometimes people like that, you really can't talk them out of what their ambitions are.
The students at Tucson, we've interviewed a lot of them, dozens of students, and they've said, you know what, we feel like we're victims of child abuse because we're being told that we're terrorists. We're being told that we're, and some of them have cried. Some of the parents have said, I'm supporting my child, but have been in tears in front of us. What would you say to them about what they're going through, since you have that foresight?
Well, I would say to them that we need to use that energy and those feelings that they have to do something to change it. We don't want to stay in that victim mode. No, we have to use that energy, and then those feelings are very strong, emotions are very strong. We need to convert them. We need to convert those feelings into the energy, a positive energy, to get out there and to organize, and not only our family, but our neighbors, our friends, and everybody, so that we can, that 30% of Latinos in Arizona can go out there and help convert the majority of the state to get rid of these unjust laws. And it's not going to happen unless they do it. Yeah, we can appeal to the courts. I know there's, 1070s in the Supreme Court right now. We don't know what's going to happen. We'll probably know in a few days. And this law that they passed to get rid of the Mexican American Studies, ethnic studies, that can also be overturned. But you've got to organize, and you've got to make it happen. And we've got to get our people elected to the school board, our people elected to the state legislature, our people elected to the Congress. And we can do it because we have the numbers. But if all we do is cry, then nothing's going to happen. We've got to act.
Ms. Huerta, what would you like to say to these students at Tucson who look to you and who might have been surprised by your speech, and maybe let's say they haven't seen you, and say, where is Dolores Huerta? She started this and now she's left us alone.
Well, I've actually been back to Tucson since I made that speech, probably about 15 times, because I have been back there a lot. Not only for the marches, but I've again gone back to that same school to speak, and I've spoken at other schools in Tucson, Arizona. It's almost a yearly pilgrimage that I make to Tucson, and the one thing that I love about it is that they have a mariachi in almost every single school in Tucson, Arizona. But I want to say to the students, number one, Joe Hill said, you know, don't mourn, organize, organize. This is what we have to do. This is what we did with the farm workers. When Cesar, people said to Cesar and myself, how are you going to organize the farm workers? They don't have any power. They don't speak English. They don't have any money. They're not citizens. How can you possibly organize them? And the message to them is, we have power. You have power, but the power's in your person. And the way that we use our power is that we use our power together with other people. And then we put our power together, but then we have to take action. You can't just sit there and complain. You've got to do something. And the farm workers did this. They went on strikes. They went on marches. They did boycotts. Went from little farm worker towns in California all the way to New York City and to Florida and to Canada and to Europe, asking people not to eat grapes. So and I love to tell the story about this one farm worker. When we were in New York City, I was in charge of the boycott, and he called me and he said, Señora Huerta, ya quitaron la uva. Señora Huerta, they took the grapes off the store. And I said, what's the name of the store? And he said, I don't know. I told him, look at the sign. And he said, Señora, I don't know how to read. But this one farm worker was in front of a store in New York City, passing out leaflets asking people, don't shop at that store until they take the grapes out. And they did. The power of one person. But so we just can't cry. We've got to get out there. We've got to organize our families, our friends, our neighborhoods. We've got to get out there. And even if people are undocumented, like in the farm worker movement, you know, we always win a lot of elections. Most of the people that are working in those elections aren't citizens. When Hilda Solis ran for the U.S. Congress, you know, we had farm workers that traveled 4 hours all the way from Blythe to Los Angeles, from Fresno to Los Angeles, 4-hour drives in the pouring rain using garbage bags, you know, as their raincoats, and she won with 30% of the vote because of farm workers that were going door to door knocking. So we have the power. It comes from the bottom, but we're the ones that have to do it. Nobody's going to do it for us. Nobody's going to change anything for us. We have to take the responsibility and understand that only we could do it. And you know what? There's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that says that we have to conform. Nothing. That is not mandated in our Constitution. No, we don't have to conform. We've got to bring our story, our image, our ethnicity. We've got to bring it to our country because this is what makes our country rich. Sí se puede.
Ms. Huerta, what's your opinion on same-sex marriage?
To quote Benito Juarez, who said, El respeto al derecho ajeno es la paz, respecting other people's rights is peace. Whom someone falls in love with, wants to live with, wants to marry, it's their constitutional and moral right. So we should respect people regardless of whom they want to marry. I mean, there's nothing wrong with same-sex marriage. It doesn't affect your life, it doesn't affect my life. So we should support it, and also to end the discrimination of people who happen to be gay or lesbian or bisexual or transgender. These are human beings. They're part of our human family, and we need to support them and respect them.
Well, you're very Catholic.
I'm very Catholic, but I've also been divorced, and I also believe in women's right to choose. I believe, again, a woman has that right over her reproductive body, how many children she decides that she wants to have. No one should be able to tell a woman how many children she needs to have or what she should do with her life. That is the woman's right to choose.
Why did you... Have you seen a significant improvement in the Mexican-American community or general Latino community since you started organizing?
Oh, absolutely. The farm worker movement really was the wind, so to speak, that started the Chicano movement. And I believe that when students saw that farm workers were willing to walk out and leave their jobs to strike for a better life, and the students in Los Angeles did the same thing, and they did the walkouts, because they wanted to improve their educational systems. And then you had, the riots that happened at the campuses at San Francisco State and in other places there to open the doors so that Latinos and African Americans could get into the colleges. That made such a big difference, and I believe it all started initially with the farm workers movement. So I feel like, I've been really blessed to have been part of that, and been part of that movement that has made such a difference. Because when we started, organizing, you didn't have Chicano engineer organizations or the La Raza lawyers or Mexican American Bar and all of these other organizations that were starting. Now you have all types of professional organizations that are made of Mexican Americans or Latinos. And this didn't exist. This didn't exist when I was growing up. Everybody took racism and segregation as a matter of fact. I mean, at least now people know they can fight against it.
If you were, let's say, in 30 years from now, looking back, what do you see in the next 30 in the next 30 years in terms of how things should be? What do you want this world to look like in 30 years?
I believe that this world, we can achieve peace in our world, we can end racism and sexism and homophobia in our country, but it's not going to happen unless the people do it, unless the people actually are able to take control of their own government. And unless we do that, I think we're going to find that we're going to have the greedy and the powerful that are going to control. And they will cause this divisiveness, because if they can keep people divided, then people will not come together. If they can keep people hating each other, then people will not come together. So we know that a lot of this racism and division is perpetuated. A lot of this mongering of hate is done specifically so that people, number one, don't feel like they have any power. But once our citizens of the world understand that they do have power, we can end dictatorships, we can take over governments. But it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of sacrifice. I think that in our United States of America, we did show the world that you can have a democratic society. But even in our own democratic society, we have seen that the people don't have control, that we have more corporate control than you have worker control, with the attack on labor unions and on women and on immigrants and all of these, on our gay community. So it's always trying to keep people divided so that they will not come together. I believe that, for my 80th birthday, we did a big concert called Weaving Movements Together, bringing people together. That's where the power, our power is at, if we can all come together and work together.
And what did Dolores Huerta do to make that happen?
What I've done with my entire life is just, once I learned about organization, which I learned actually, it came out of East Los Angeles with Fred Ross Sr. and the Community Service Organization. And in my first house meeting, when Fred showed us pictures of, you had a couple of hundred people in a meeting, and you had stories about how they brought in the streets and the street lights into Maravilla and East Los Angeles, and how they got the first Latino elected to the Congress, Ed Roybal, and how they sent 14 police to prison for beating up Mexican-American kids. Then I was hooked for life, and that's what I've been doing ever since then.
And last question, it's a silly question. Are you a radical, or are you just someone who's just passionate?
I believe I'm just passionate. I don't think I'm a radical. I kind of get attacked by many people who happen to be radical, and mostly because I do believe in the electoral process. I do believe that we do have a method of changing here, and which is the electoral process by voting people. But at the same time, we have to have informed voters so they'll know that they'll know what they're voting for and who they should be voting for, and also to get people to run for these offices. And then we have to change our whole campaign system so that you don't have to be a millionaire to run for office, that an ordinary person can run for office. We've got to fight for public financing, and right now it seems like we're going in the other direction. But sometimes that happens. I mean, before we passed the last amnesty bill in 1986, where we actually got 1,400,000 farm workers legalized, and I'm the one that worked on that bill in Washington to make that happen. Before that happened, we had all these attacks on immigrants just the way that we have it now. And I see that very soon we are going to have another immigration reform bill. But again, it's going to depend on how much work we do.
Do you have anything else you would like to say?
Well, I believe that the media is extremely powerful, whether it be through songs, through theater, and of course through movies, through documentaries. And so I just want to thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good. Okay, all right. Okay.
Sí se puede.
Sí se puede.